again, and welcome to the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show. I'm your host, Rashonda Thornton, and we are now in season 2 of this podcast production. And so as we're getting ready to roll out all our guests, I want to introduce you to one of my long-term podcast partners, Undeniably Dairy. And if you haven't heard of Undeniably Dairy, it is a part of Midwest Dairy Council, and they're putting out ways of messaging the ways to give yourself nutrients when it comes to how you incorporate healthy dairy products in every meal and every snack. And when we think about dairy products, it's not just about milk. It's actually composed of several different products that can provide the same non-essential nutrients, being protein, calcium, and potassium as a few. So if your goal is to start this 2021 year off, start with planning and implementing more healthy foods and healthy sources in your body, and that comes with implementing more dairy. So whether it's a simple string cheese stick, create a smooth, fruity Greek yogurt parfait, or even just adding milk to your smoothies, go actually to dairygood.com and you'll find some of these recipes, some nutritional information that will give you the equipment that you need to know that you're making the right choice when it comes to your nutrition. And also find ways to be creative in how you're feeding yourself. Find them on their website at dairygood.com or follow them on Instagram at Midwest Dairy. So in addition to that, you've seen me several different times talk about how we're going to start, not just changing our perspective, but learning how to place it intact when it comes to our nutrition, our wellness, how we feel and care about ourselves. So I got a question for you. We have 2020 behind us, and now we have 2021 in front of us. And I know everyone wants to start off with their New Year's resolutions, but my question for you is, what are your plans for the new year? And is your plan something that's going to be short-lived, or is it going to be something long-term, long-sustainable? Because when you make plans, they can go either direction. You can either move forward by making goals and executing them, or you can stay stagnant by just getting by, but never really truly step up to the plate of what you want to do and what you deserve for yourself. Or you can go the opposite direction by going backwards with ignoring the fact that change has to happen. And of course, there's no surefire way to meet any goals, but whatever you tried in the past, ask yourself, has it worked? And if it hasn't, ask yourself, what other approaches can you take to ensure that they do work, especially for this given year? So as you should know a little bit about my background, I've been a consultant dietitian for the last 8 years and been in the wellness industry for over 12 years. And I work with hundreds of people in regard to their nutrition. I help people with customizing and developing a new way of approaching their nutrition, not trying to change their old ways, but giving them a new perspective on how to tackle this lifelong struggle they've had with food. But also talk about struggles, help to teach them how to overcome their personal struggles. And by doing so, building a new relationship with food that is more so self-serving and not self-sabotaging. So again, I'm a dietitian, and working with a dietitian, it would always ensure that your nutrition would never be compromised. There's no food groups going to be taken out. We're not taking half the calories out of our day. Our body needs those particular nutrients just to live. And so teaming up with someone, a healthcare professional that has that knowledge, that has that ability to help you, that's what you want to seek for your long-term changes, whether it's your weight, your health, or just clean eating practices. So me personally, I see to it that your life and your healthy eating are aligned to where they're like living a harmonious life. I always say marry nutrition to your life. So that means instead of fitting you into this system or program that may not really be you, I'll build your program around you. And so what does that mean? That means your mindset changes away from past eating cultures. You begin to recognize all the little and big things that have been holding you back. And you'll finally be able to jump off that roller coaster of weight gain and weight loss. So this particular month in January, I want to extend and commemorate my 12 years being in the industry and offer a 12% discount for anyone that wants to partake in any of my services. If you want to learn more about where you can find what I do for a living and my services, simply go to my website at www.rashondathornton.com or follow me on Instagram at The Dietitian Against Diets, or you can find me on Facebook at Rashonda Arbella Vessel. Get on there, jump on there, read a little bit about me, kind of see what aligns with your thoughts and your goals, where you want to be, And take that next step and let's have a conversation. I offer 15-minute free consultations just to see where you're at, what you're looking for, and then seeing if it makes sense for us to work together. So find me, contact me, and reach out, and I would love to start your next journey of health for yourself. So stay tuned and get ready for my podcast guest coming up soon. Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of The Dietitian Against Diets. I want to introduce myself. I'm Rashonda Thornton, and I want to also introduce my guest today, Dr. Mark Manary. Let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we'll go into more conversations. He is a pediatric physician here at Washington University in St. Louis, and one of the world's foremost experts in child malnutrition, where most of his work has been throughout the sub-Saharan area in Africa. As the CEO and founder of Project Peanutbutter, he has developed novel foods for infants, children, and recently pregnant women by way of RUTFs, which is another word for ready-to-use therapeutic foods. In addition, he is also known for contributing to the improvement of agricultural practices and food systems. Overall, Dr. Mark Manary has recognized the power of nutrition and how it can improve almost every asset and facet of life. So overall, he's pretty much dedicated his life to fixing the malnutrition in Africa. So I want to say welcome, Dr. Manary. I'm glad you found some time to have some conversations with us today.
Thank you, Rashonda, and thank you for inviting me to participate.
Yes. This is a hot topic. And so, before we even go into some of the different areas that we have a lot to talk about. I want to when it comes to malnutrition, it's something that's obviously a worldwide pandemic or epidemic, but we also see it here at home in the U.S. But before we start talking about other areas in which you focus on, I would love to kind of allow you to discuss your work and the significant findings you have found over the years of your work, and also what are some of the common threads you have seen across the world when it comes to malnutrition in children.
Well, Rashonda, I first went to Africa and have lived there and worked there in a very firsthand, everyday way much of that time since 1985. So it's really been my whole working life that's where I've been focused. And one of the things that's different about Africa than, say, North America is that most people there produce their own food. They're subsistence farmers. They're growing. Maybe they do a little trading, bartering for food, but they're very much connected to the production of their food. They know exactly how hard it is to get and where to get it from. And they live in a system where if everything pretty much goes right, their family's going to have enough to eat. And for most people, that's really the case. But for a few, there's some bad luck. So I think that the first message I want to have is that when we have starvation, it's not usually about wars, floods, major disruptions. It's just about some bad luck. And what kind of bad luck are we talking about here? We're talking about, say, a family's, one of their brothers or sisters of the heads of household has to move in with them, and suddenly there's twice as many people to feed. And that doesn't work. Or maybe as a child that gets malaria 3 times in the last 6 weeks. That's pretty frequent. That's more than you would normally expect.
Wow.
Just things like that. Maybe their garden got messed up by animals or pests. This is what causes malnutrition in the world. 80% of it. It's not the TV blaring dramatic emergencies that cause this. And for most people, they don't have that bad luck and they do just fine. But for those that do, just that their food system is fragile enough that just interrupting it for a few weeks sends somebody into malnutrition. And usually that's one of the most vulnerable people in the family. That's going to be a younger child. Okay. So that I think is the first conception I would like to share is that this is not a problem of just very bad human nature and very awful things happening by people, but it's bad luck.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because obviously, being in the U.S., the only images or media that we see, is the starvation, but we see that it's due to the land or due to definitely not due to some of the elements that you're talking about. And again, you're just reiterating not just the conditions. It's not about the conditions they live in. It's the circumstances in which they're faced, and they're having to find a way to allot whatever resource they have when it comes to food, and sometimes it doesn't make it to every mouth. And for one thing, being a pediatrician, malnutrition really has been your focal point. And so obviously Africa is like your second home, or I would almost say U.S. is your second home because you're there almost half the time.
Sure, yeah.
But how have you used your project Peanutbutter? How has that how has that really changed the malnutrition situation there in Africa?
Yeah. So when I was working in Malawi in '94, I'd been in Africa about 9 years at that point. We noticed that the biggest problem seemed to be that kids were sick because they didn't get enough to eat, and they were being brought to the hospital with malnutrition. And of course, we tried very standard therapeutic options and foods, liquid foods, and they didn't work. They could save a kid's life, but we could never get kids to recover.
Okay.
And that's because the hospital isn't a very good place to recover from a nutritional problem. It's a very exogenous place. It's not where your family and your caring unit is surrounding you. It's not where you are integrated into the rest of your life as a young child. So in '99 or so, we said, we're very interested in some kind of home-based therapy. And what's going to be home-based? Well, it's got to be something that doesn't need firewood, no cooking necessary, something that bacteria can't live in, that means very little water in the food, something full of fat and protein, and something that is shelf stable. I mean, it can sit out in ambient conditions for weeks on end and doesn't spoil. And to an American, that's peanut butter. That's the one thing that's in our cupboard that kind of meets those criteria. So we took some peanut butter and we blended in some milk powder, which is absolutely essential nutritious for recovering from malnutrition. Added some oil and sugar and lots of vitamins and minerals. And that's what RUTF is. That's what ready-to-use therapeutic food is. And we treated kids at home. And we used to see a recovery rate of 25 to 45% in the hospital. It went to 90%. 90%. Oh, wow. By just giving the mothers this peanut butter food and going home, and not hanging around the hospital. And so that was the game changer. That we did that first trial in 2001. And so, that was nice. That was a nice accomplishment, a scientific accomplishment. People somewhat took notice of it. But, as far as that goes, that meant to me that I knew how to take care of as many of those kids as I could possibly take care of. But how could I get that out to people, kids I was never going to meet? How could I put that miracle of recovery in those kids' bodies? And so that's where we started this not-for-profit, because there we make the food locally in 4 countries now in sub-Saharan Africa. The Project Peanutbutter is more of providing, making this food locally. Now, you can't ask a family to make this themselves, because basically they already got the situation where they've run out of food at their house. That kind of pulling up by your own bootstraps is just not effective.
It doesn't work there.
But it's something that we can make locally. Sure, we have to bring in milk. Sure, we have to bring in vitamins, but the other ingredients can all be pretty local. And so that's the revolution that we started in 2001. And by 2007, it was endorsed by all the UN agencies, and now is considered the standard around the world. So this is an old story.
So you started in Africa, but now it has expanded across the world. Wow.
Well, it is. There's not this very much malnutrition in South America. And really the other spot in the world where there's a fair amount of it is South Asia. So India, Pakistan, places like that. But
and I'm glad you said it, because you talked about the ingredients that's inside the peanut butter combination. And it seemed like you're intentional in finding sources that will provide as many nutrients as possible in a natural way, because you mentioned the milk powder. And so I'm assuming that, just having a combination of obviously the healthy fat with the peanut butter, but also bringing in the milk powder and also with additional vitamins. I guess that combination was what was the magic potion that will provide those nutrients for those young children.
For sure. Now, our choices, when we originally put that together, were more based on food safety. Okay, we always would start with nutritious ingredients, but we wanted, remember those qualities, we wanted something that wouldn't spoil. So sugar doesn't spoil, vegetable oil doesn't spoil. So that's why those are included, and they provide the energy, of course.
Yeah. So I want to shift over to, what would be comparable to like what U.S. face as far as malnutrition. I know according to WHO, World Health Organization, malnutrition is credited as the largest contributor for child mortality in the world. Now, I know with the U.S. children, they come with their own host of problems. But in regard to malnutrition, what would be some common nutrition deficiencies that you see children here in the U.S. Face?
Well, we don't see any of these pictures of the kids like we see in Africa that are skin and bones. They're very thin. They've lost a lot of weight from their malnutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Typically in the US, we're going to see children who have some kind of disease that prevents their body from either taking up the nutrients or consuming enough food, perhaps a chronic infection. So the cause may be a little different. There in
Mm-hmm.
Africa, somebody's family's running out of food. That's what drives them over the limit, right? And here it's going to have to do with some kind of associated illness. And of course, that is not going to be treated by food alone. There's absolutely nothing wrong with our UTF. We could all eat it here in the US. Where our bodies are essentially the same the world over, the way they run, their metabolism. And so our UTF is still a very good food for the US, but you need to address the associated medical problems,
Mm-hmm.
in to effectively control things in the U.S.
Yes. And also, if we align that, unfortunately with the U.S., we kind of face the opposite when it comes to childhood obesity. Now, that's the new um, epidemic that's coming in our country. And so, even with that, there is a spectrum of malnutrition within that realm as well. Wouldn't you agree?
For sure, that is the biggest nutritional problem kids in the U.S. face, and a key part of that is a little bit opposite of the program and labels we're dealing with in this nutrition labeled program is activity, is exercise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's not one boogeyman about what's causing this obesity, but this is the biggest elephant in the room is the lack. I mean, people always used to get out of their car and lift up their garage door. Kids always used to go to the sand lot, the playground, and play for 2 hours after school, unsupervised, running around after each other. Um, you know, we can think of lots and lots and lots of examples where we have these sort of very modern work-saving devices, but they've also led us to situations where you wouldn't have seen a fitness club when I was a kid
True.
for anything.
You didn't
Now we
need
have
it.
to artificially manufacture exercise,
Mm-hmm.
and likewise, when you think about where I spent most of my time in Africa, I mean, these people are very physically active all day, and they're some of the strongest people you'll ever want to meet.
Hmm. And I bet they're strong-hearted as well. I'm very grateful. So so let's talk a little bit about the science component of it, because science is facts. Science, there is, and science is still an evolving aspect as well. But you mentioned that you explore the pathophysiology and metabolism of malnutrition, and you also have kind of shifted into looking at the gut biome and the metabiome around health and disease. So with the combination of your research and the combination of what you're physically developing and creating, why is the science behind it so important to you, and what have you found that it has told us?
Yeah, I mean, the paradigm of the bacteria that inhabit our gut is a little bit, hard to get your mind around for just, I think, a typical educated American, is that germs tend to have a bad reputation. They're bad. We don't want germs on things. People would say they don't want germs in their food, but our gut is full of germs, and we can't live a healthy life without that.
Yes.
Okay, the germs are there. They they aren't there by chance. They're cultivated, just like the garden in your backyard. When you plant, peppers, you usually expect peppers. You can get weeds too, occasionally, but mostly what you get is peppers. And so our bodies are nurturing a garden of microorganisms in there, and those microorganisms do a lot of things. They protect us from other microorganisms that might
Mm-hmm.
cause disease. They make metabolites and compounds that our body needs. You know, we as a being, we have our proteins are made of these components, amino acids. Our body can't make half of those amino acids on its own anymore. It relies on either the bacteria or our diet to provide those. So it's hugely important, and it's something 2 decades ago we had no appreciation of. Not just you and me, but
Mm-hmm.
as a scientific or medical community. So now we don't know exactly how to use that yet very well,
Yes.
but we know that it's very important. And in fact, one of the pieces of work that we did is we showed that this severe acute malnutrition is in part caused by the bacteria that are hanging out in the gut there, that are certain populations of bacteria are needed for certain kinds of malnutrition together as a thing. So I think that
That's something.
none of us are going to be smart enough to understand biology in total, even the smartest of us. But there are people who say build a machine like a car or a washing machine or something. They can understand everything about that, and so they can design one better. They can think the problems through. But in biology, really, we need to do is just be good observers, and when we see that something works, we need to stick with it. Now, to get this back to what we're here talking about is, let's bring up fermented foods. What is in fermented foods that does something for these bacteria? Well, there are bacteria in fermented foods. That's what fermentation is. It's bacteria changing those nutrients a bit before we eat them. The other thing is that when you think about, like, say, milk, what milk sugar is. Milk sugar is lactose. It's something that doesn't appear in plants usually ever, but it's made naturally by mothers for their babies. And what does that do? Yes, some of it's broken down and absorbed into the body. But not much of it just feeds these bacteria. It sets these bacteria. It says, this is the kind of populations of bacteria that we want to have in our gut, ones that survive and thrive on lactose. And so that is hugely important. And I think that we could say, like, the observation, milk was good for healing malnutrition before we knew anything about these bacteria.
Yes.
Part of that reason, it still has its effect whether we know about it or not. We're not smart enough to figure that out. So my point about the bacteria is there may be traditions or observations, like in fermented foods and milk, that point us to truth about what's good for health.
And we know it, prebiotics and probiotics, that dairy products has been on the front end of that. It's providing that healthy bacteria. But I guess my question is, a lot of people, and this is more of a consumer question, because a lot of people, there has been a big wave of just lactose intolerance. Now, I don't know if that's a specific diagnosis for that, or that's just something that comes in waves. But, I know you talked about the adaptability of your gut health and how it can change, the environment can change. What do you say about those who feel like lactose is something that hasn't really set well in their gut?
Yeah, that's quite a story. You got me off. Now you're going to get a good answer about what this is. So lactose is a sugar, and sugars that tend to be two molecules of sugar stuck together. And you need an enzyme to break them into single sugars, and that's what the body absorbs as a nutrient, right? And we make the enzyme to break lactose, something called lactase, in limited quantities. It's kind of the way enzymes work is that if your body wants to use a lot of them, they make a lot more of them. They're like
needed.
If you need to use a lot of silverware, you're going to buy a lot of silverware, but you're not going to just keep lots of silverware in some fixed amount in your kitchen. And their body in the gut is not going to keep some amount of lactase in a fixed amount in its gut. So first of all, if you start consuming considerable portions of lactose, your body's going to make the enzymes to start being able to use more and more of it. But second of all, why did that come about is because in the 1970s, before they knew anything about the gut bacteria as doing anything good, people noticed that the gut is shaped like little fingers, like my fingers on my hand, and the lactase enzyme happens up at the top of these fingers. And
Okay.
then when people got sick, they get sort of shorter fingers on their gut. Okay, and and they said, well, because the end is where that lactase is, there's no more end anymore. Then it must not be good for them. We shouldn't feed it to kids with diarrhea, and we shouldn't feed it to people who have some kind of damaged guts. And that was just an idea in a man's mind, not borne out by any particular fact.
Huh.
So to me, I mean, this is going to be a controversial thing to say, but I think lactose intolerance is mostly made up.
Yeah, as I was wondering, like, is it how long has it been a diagnosis? Or because people are quick to say, oh, I'm lactose intolerant. And obviously, as a dietitian, I always try to let them know that there's different ranges of milk sugars that are in certain dairy products. And sometimes if you do feel that there is more of an immediate response to having some higher sugar dairy products, perhaps start with something that's lower into where your gut can tolerate it, and you find that you can eventually have other sources of dairy products that does have more lactose in it. But I think people are still real quick still to say that they can't drink milk or they can't have any dairy products. And like just what you said,
Yeah.
your body will produce more of those enzymes as you are having more, as there's more of a need for it. And so, immediately it may be a negative effect, but I know you had mentioned too, because it's different type of sugar as well. It's not like a fruit sugar. It's not like a processed sugar. So it does take time, a lot longer to break down in your gut than comparable to other forms of sugar.
Yeah. And our gut and our mind are connected. 90% of the nerves in our body from our brain go to our gut. And I remember way back in college, some experience which just taught me how much our mind can affect what we think about what's going on in our gut. And this was a psychology teacher who said he was doing
Okay.
an experiment, and he asked students if they wanted to participate. And here's what they did. He said, well, I've got a medicine here that's going to keep you from, when you feel sick to your stomach, it'll stop you from feeling sick to your stomach. And there's a medicine called Ipecac, which makes you feel sick to your stomach. And so he said, he's giving everybody a dose of Ipecac. And there were hundreds of people in this room at MIT in the 1970s. And he says, raise your hand when you start feeling sick to your stomach, and we'll come around and give you this special medicine. And most people raised their hand. Most people got the special medicine. 90% of them said that this helped. And the second medicine they got was the same thing, Ipecac, to make them more sick to their stomach.
Wow.
So
there you go.
There's a huge connection. And I think what you're touching on, Rashonda, is people have in their minds, their body can't deal with lactose, and they're going to start feeling things in their gut and so forth and so forth. Now, there are some very special conditions, and medical conditions where lactose isn't indicated. And for those people who have that, I mean, it's one in thousands or one in several hundred. It's not everybody you meet, and it's not most people.
Yeah. No, I like that you broke it down like that and do the connection with what our mind is telling us in the gut and vice versa. Because again, I think that for me, I just noticed it's too much of a benefit when it comes to dairy products and what they provide. Especially now, you're talking about milk powder was inside of your RUTFs. I mean, that just shows how nutritionally dense dairy products is. And if someone does have a reaction to it, perhaps understanding the value of it, taking time and just implementing it slowly into their diet, until their gut has adapted to it and is able to break it down effectively. So it's good that you brought that up, because a lot of people they just shun themselves from it without recognizing how much of a benefit it can actually be.
Yes, very much. And that's when one of the big issue raised with RUTF is it's got milk in it, and whose gut is more fragile than a severely malnourished kid? No one's. That is the most vulnerable, fragile gut. And so people made RUTFs without lactose, and they did not work any better one bit.
There you go.
So we have to follow. I would say I'm an empiricist, is what I would say. I'm somebody who is going to follow what happens, and if I see good things happening, I'm going to follow in that
Keep
direction.
going. Yeah, keep going
And
down
if
that
I
path.
don't, I'm going to back off. I'm not going to go that way.
Yeah. I'm glad we brought that up because it really is a hot topic, especially within the last 5 to 6 years. But one other thing that you focus on too is sustainability and how important it is when it comes to agriculture. And I know that where you were in Africa, like you worked to improve, their food systems and how you brought in these certain practices. Now, I guess my question is like I don't really know the intricacies of those practices, but is it something that's specific to their country, or are some certain practices that you've seen in the U.S. that you've been able to kind of transition over there?
Well, no, it's not something I brought to from the U.S. at all. I mean, we have a very different agriculture system in the U.S. And as I pointed out in the beginning, most of our food is produced by, I mean, I don't know, but I'm going to guess that 1% of American are farmers, hardly any, very small people in making very, very large amounts of food
Yes, doing a lot of
and
work behind the
making
scenes.
a fairly limited number of different crops. Whereas people in Africa, for the most part, are growing their food.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not growing your own food, it's your brother who's growing the food.
Okay.
It's still within your reach. And they're planting much more diverse gardens. And in terms of dairy's a hard one in many ways for Africa, right? Because it's harder to keep a cow than it is to plant
Mm-hmm.
beans,
I would imagine.
really. A lot of my agriculture work has focused on legumes, actually, as a particularly healthy plant.
Okay.
And
Yes.
we certainly, when we know milk is being very, very helpful in young children in malnutrition and so forth, we we do turn to that. Now, I suppose that's the blessing of world trade or something, right? That we can produce
Import.
milk in those areas where you can't grow very many crops, where the latitude's above 45 degrees or whatever, and they can trade that,
Mm-hmm.
for exchange things that they can grow in the South in much more plentiful, verdant environments.
One thing you did say, and it stuck out to me, like I don't think people understand. You mentioned like 1% of our agriculture is different. Another each country. It sounds like in Africa, someone if your next door neighbors is growing something, so it's a common thing with the citizens there. They see where their food comes from, and they can appreciate it at a different level because they've done the work. They picked it. They've grown it. They depend on it. And I feel like in America, you mentioned 1% of our population are farmers, and they do a lot of work. But when it comes to Americans, they don't. I don't think I think there's a lack of connection and understanding where food comes from. So I feel like because of there's a lack of connection, there's also a lack of appreciation. Now, when it comes to sustainability practices in agricultural, I know you mentioned even dairy, like the dairy farmers and things like that. And I know over the last 10, 20 years, they have really rearranged their practices to where they're even everything from their ground and the water, everything they're doing is they're utilizing less resources, but still being able to produce the same amount of produce or dairy at the same high quality. And so for consumers, when there is a lack of understanding the connection, I mean, again, I think that goes back to not really appreciating the importance of certain nutrients that come from certain foods, comparable to countries that's their livelihood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And what I think one of the beautiful things why I turned to dairy is because there's a food processing element between the milk, the cow, and the consumer, and that's these milk products can be powdered, and then
Mm-hmm.
powdered are stable, safe, and can be moved around the world. We don't really see that with, say, other animal source products like meat or eggs. So I mean, dairy's got a leg up on that, and that's why one of the reasons we turn to dairy is because it has such a strong processing element. Now, at my house here in St. Louis, I mean, we drink liquid milk, but yeah.
Uh huh. So that to me that says again it says a lot for what we don't see and what we don't appreciate. I kind of look at, farmers, dairy farmers particularly, they actually, the work that they do is actually, we talk about malnutrition and things like that, that they're protecting us by being able to keep that food system going, to where we are getting high dense foods, in smaller amounts. And I feel like it's overlooked. It's been taken for granted, and the value is just not the value of what they do. Because I'm a city girl, but I have gone down to a lot of farms here in Missouri, and I have seen like they hours for hours and days and days. They don't have days off. They're constantly working with the cows. They're constantly, making sure that the milk is as high as grade. It's just a lot of like heart that's in it as well. And again, when I hear milk as something that, it should not be, put at a high tier of healthiness, it just really kind of hurts my heart, because I know that these farmers, they love their cows. They love what they do. And it's a generational thing, So we talk about agriculture and sustainability. I really feel like a lot of what they're doing is contributing to that overall sustainability that we need in our country.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're talking about milks, let me throw in a couple of other things here. I mean, there are hardly any foods, period, that provide calcium in the quantities that milk does. If you're a doctor like me and you're trying to put together a diet that has enough of everything, you can't really do it without dairy products because of calcium. Okay, really, I mean, there's just not others. There's not plants that have very much calcium in them. And so what is calcium for all of us? I mean, calcium is for 11 to 13-year-old girls absolutely critical for them reaching the maximum bone health that they have and their growth. And that's something that pays dividends decades and decades and decades on, because we don't, who do we see people suffering from calcium problems? Well, those are people that are older, and getting these fractures and this and that. So the milk is about calcium, and I think that in our country here in the U.S., right today, one of the most vulnerable groups for nutrition, for getting poor nutrition, for having malnutrition, whatever you want to say, are girls, younger adolescent girls, 10, 13, 14 years old, in that age group. Their body is going through a growth spurt. It has a huge amount of requirement. And yet what do we have? We have a social situation that says, be super thin and don't eat. We've got a situation where people, smirk if they say like, oh, we're drinking milk for health. No, it's Coca-Cola, dear, that you need.
Yes, I totally agree. Because, it's a combination of, especially that age bracket of girls, their body is changing, hormones, their bones are just an opportunity where their bones are going to be, its ability to be as strong as it's right. And it's that sweet spot for their body to get that calcium that they need. But it's also a combination of, the malnutrition piece, because they may find themselves, that may be the group that's influenced in a negative way, to where they're eating less, because they have this imagery of they have to have a certain look, a certain size. And then when you say, the older population, now how are we going to help lower the risk of osteoporosis, or the process of it? And that's making sure that we're constantly, having these nutrients that come in, and we can only get so much from plants, and we can only get so much from other sources, but a main source would be dairy. So I totally agree.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So before I want to do like a quick round with you. It's called Burning Questions. I'm really curious. I want to pick your brain a little bit more. So I'm going to call it 5 questions in 5 minutes. But before we do so, I want to take a quick pause, Dr. Mark Manary, if you don't mind, and we're going to do a dairy snack moment. So if you just hold on a second, we'll be right back. Okay, we're taking a quick breather, and we're going to have our dairy snack moment segment. Now, this segment is brought to you by Midwest Dairy Farmers. I'm going to show you one of my favorite snacks that I usually have at least 2 or 3 times a day. Oh, not a day, 2 or 3 times a week. It's my favorite morning snack. I have here with me Greek yogurt, but it's like a chocolate Greek yogurt. So I'm going to show you and tell you how and why I'm having this particular snack. 5 reasons why having dairy into your daily eating regimen, why it's so important. Well, number 1, you're getting 9 essential nutrients in one given time. And for me, it's worth it because if I know I'm getting all the nutrients I can get in at one time, that to me saves time. I feel good about what I'm eating, and I can check that box of I'm getting my nutrients in. But guess what? It's good for my body, but man, it really tastes good on my tongue. The cool taste and creamy taste is just satisfying. Just makes for a delightful morning. Also, protein is something we know Greek yogurt is known for having. So I know I'm getting my 15 grams of protein in. So to me, it makes me feel good. I'm making my protein box check. And it's not really, really expensive to have this particular snack. I can grab it out of the grocery store. I can buy a larger tub and just kind of divvy it out throughout the week. So I'm really saving $1. And also, it's good for my gut health too. And that's something that we all know now when it comes to our gut health, how important to have those probiotics in our system. And having a dairy product such as Greek yogurt contributes to that. So I want to show you, this is my simple way of having it. And you can just stay simple, or you can get creative by adding granola, dry fruit, berries, chopped nuts. If you want more flavor or texture, and just kind of change it up a little bit. So I have with me, depends on how risky I want to get on my snacking. I like texture, so I'll put my slivered almonds on it. To me, it gives me a nice crunch. I know I'm getting my healthy fats. Again, adding in some nutrients and value to my snacks. And if I want to just have a little bit of more sweetness, I'll add a couple of chocolate morsels. And again, it just helps to have it to where it just feels like I'm having like a nightlight dessert. And I can also kind of have this at nighttime too. And I can have all of this and not feel guilty, knowing that I'm giving my body good nutrients. Now, if you want to find recipes like this, I want to encourage you to go to www.usdairy.com/recipes, and you'll find some more delightful ways you can add dairy to your foods. Okay, so guys, I hope you like that snack. It's one of my favorites, and I'm going to send you the recipe. I don't want you to go to usdairygoods.com/recipe to find more recipes of fun, healthy, and quick dairy snacks. So back here with Dr. Manary, I am going to put you on the spot. And I kind of prepped you. I gave you some of the questions, but I'm going to fire out 5 questions for you. And these are questions that, I have had in the past. These questions I'm always asked as being a dietitian, and these are some questions that I just kind of see always floating in media. So I really want to get your perspective, get what your opinions are. And if you don't mind, I'm going to start off with the first one. We were talking a lot about dairy over the last end of our conversation, and you mentioned about dairy, how the natural ingredients of calcium being one of them. We know there's 8 other essential nutrients and vitamins that's also involved in milk. So would you consider dairy a natural food? And I say natural because most foods, in my opinion, has always have some sort of additives in it. And sometimes when we talk about, natural eating, I feel milk probably falls into a category. What would be your opinion about that?
Yeah, for sure. It's a natural food. I mean, that is how mammals feed their young, through milk. There's nothing more natural.
That is so true. Even thinking about a mother breastfeeding, I mean, you get all your nutrients in one big bolus. Yes. So I would consider, so I concur with you that it is a natural food. And it also, it comes with an abundance of nutrients that is just the value of it. You just can't argue why it's something that should not be a part of your everyday regimen. Now, we all know too that, with milk, with media, milk has a high amount of protein, and actually is one of the higher quality amino acid profile proteins. Now, we know you talked about putting milk powders on the RUTFs. So apparently protein is significant. So what would you say, what specifically that the specifics of protein, why it's so important besides just building muscle? It's way more than just building muscle.
Right. I mean, proteins constitute every working part of our body. Okay. If we think about a cell's got, a fat on the outside to keep the water and the stuff in and the other stuff out. And then every piece of working machinery in the body is made from protein. And protein is something we don't keep large reserves of in the body. We can have bodies that have fat reserves that are good enough for 6 months, but we only store our protein in muscle. And so the way our bodies work right now is that we need to take in protein in a regular way. And protein is really made up of these little components, amino acids, and they're not transferable to each other. They're not interconvertible. We need all of them. We need all of them in certain kinds of ratios. And so I think that protein is the most important macronutrient. We can get energy from a variety of sources, in a variety of other ways, but protein's it.
Yeah, and also proteins is heavily involved in our immunity system. And that too is for people, when there's rapid weight loss in regards to being sick or coming out of some sort of procedure or surgery. There's always weight loss is always what we don't want to have coming out, because obviously protein is the first component to go whenever your body is distressed. And so again, when it comes to your immune system, protein is needed in so many different aspects. Now, some people say, I've heard media say, we talk about, dairy, and we say, cow's milk. It say cow's milk is not nutritionally suited for humans. Why is that true or not true, in your opinion, or from your perspective?
The only case that I think that's not true in is you can't take a newborn baby and feed them cow's milk. Because the cow's milk is made for a newborn cow, and there's too much protein in there and just doesn't have the right balance of nutrients. But there's milk otherwise is healthy for any age group, really. I don't see, it's got a lot of protein. It doesn't have that much fat. So don't feed your under 6 month old cow's milk, but other than that, drink up.
Drink up. Very true. Got another one for you. It's just kind of piggyback off what we talked about earlier, especially when it comes to the lactose intolerance. We know, when we look at, your balance, when USDA make their My Plate, they make their healthy, the pyramid, it's always about the different food groups. And milk is definitely one of the food groups. But even though it's held to high regard as being one of the healthiest foods that you need to have on a regular basis, people still feel that the dairy is kind of has been having a bad rap over the last 10 years. What's your opinion about people that feel that dairy is bad for them?
My opinion is we're getting a lot of focus here in this discussion on dairy, but dairy is a natural food with very healthy components in it. There's nothing, it's nominally processed using techniques that have been developed ages ago, pasteurization, really for very good food safety reasons. So it isn't, I don't think that the dairy is this particularly specialized or unhealthy food.
Yeah, and I agree. And even again, just to go back into our gut health and the new advances that when it comes to research, how we're finding the connection to our overall wellness, our mental health, physical, everything's connected to our gut. Our gut is like the core root of just our life. And so making sure that environment that comes to our healthy bacteria is what's been fed and nourished versus the unhealthy bacteria that leads to diseases and things like that. I appreciate you taking the time to ask those questions and even just pause and have these conversations, because you're getting ready to go back to Africa this week, correct? Or next week?
Yeah, at the end of the week.
Okay. And how long will you be there on this trip?
So my team, I've got a big team. I have probably about 150 or 200 people that work for me.
Okay.
We're in 4 countries, and we have about 50 people, and we're doing food production, agriculture education. We're feeding malnourished kids. We're all playing along that whole spectrum of nutrition. And I will be there about 3 weeks in Sierra Leone.
Wow. So some people are just now hearing about some of the work that you've done and that you're still doing. And I know, again, not for the Project Peanutbutter nonprofit organization that you've had and you started, and obviously has transpired into other things. How can someone, if someone is interested in learning more or contributing or volunteering or even donating their resources, how can people find out more about the project or even some other things that you are doing, and how can people learn about you?
Sure. Well, we have a website, and it's all small letters, www.projectpeanutbutter.org, no spaces. There's some beautiful videos on there that are very authentic, firsthand. They're not created in a movie studio, but they're just pictures of what the work goes on. Seek those videos out. They're 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. Um, there's a donate spot on the website as well. It takes about to feed one severely malnourished child. When we say severely, we mean somebody who has a 50% chance of dying in the next 3 months. It takes about $35 to feed that child to recovery. I mean, you won't find a better sort of cost value proposition in terms of health care investments than that one. So, and we do have people that volunteer with us and work with us in Africa, and those people tend to be young adults. Maybe they're done with college. Actually, a lot of the dietitians volunteer, Rashonda, because there's a process with dietitians where they have to like take a test after they get done with college, and they have to wait for the test results, and then they get into an internship. And usually in that interval is a period of some months. And we've had literally hundreds of young dietitians work with our projects. So yeah, those are some ways to get to know more about me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see some of my colleagues have jumped on board to support what you are doing, because nutrition is definitely what makes the world go round. And I live it and breathe it, and I preach it all the time. So I'm very delighted to have you on today. For those who want to know more about Dr. Manary, go to projectpeanutbutter.org and learn about what he's doing. I've seen the videos. They're very encapsulating. You will definitely understand the energy that comes behind it when it comes to his work and his team's work, and just really seeing the smiles on those kids' faces. He's really making changes around the world. So Dr. Manary, I appreciate all the work that you have done, that you are doing, and what you're doing to come. Thank you again for being on the show today.
Rashonda, thank you so much for inviting me. I am happy to share, and
yeah,
God bless.
Yes, thank you, and safe travels to Africa this week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yes, guys, again, seek Dr. Manary, see his work, contribute, be a part of his movement. And again, as we talked about the Dietitian Against Diets, it's not about the diet, it's a diet mentality. Let's find a way to share love, find a way to love ourselves through eating healthy. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. It's always a pleasure to have like-minded individuals on this platform talking about their own personal journeys, but how they have expanded it to help not just themselves, but for others. So if you want to continue to be a part of these conversations, please share, subscribe to this podcast. If you know someone else that you know would greatly benefit, please, I want to encourage you to share the news with those others to help them to find those ways to help them on their nutrition journey. As a Dietitian Against Diets, again, it's not about the diet, but it's the diet mentality that we are rearranging and creating a new pathway for healthy living that's sustainable, that's self-serving, and that helps us to find that true level of happiness that we've all been seeking. So until next week, I'll see you again. Take care and have a great week.